Hey there, welcome to Authentically Raw. I'm your host, Jamie Barris. Hi, and welcome to the Authentically Raw podcast. Shelly Reed, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, Shelly is a somatic practitioner and owner of Let Your Soma Speak. And why don't you tell the audience a little bit more about who you are and exactly what you do?
Yes. So, as Jamie said, my business is Let Your Soma Speak, and I'm a certified somatic practitioner. So, I am certified in somatic stress release, which I can talk more about, somatic parts work. And one of my big focuses is helping people lean more towards joy, embody their true selves, and find that playful spirit that I believe all of us have, but maybe we lost along the way as trauma and family things and societal conditioning that we just got disconnected from our playful spirit. So that's the main focus of my work.
Definitely. Well, I'll back up a little bit how we first met. I should have said that off the bat. So we met in a course that we took together, which was kind of half entrepreneurship and half how to incorporate more play and joy into your life and how to incorporate it into your work, which I think is huge. So I do definitely want to talk about that. But one more thing too is just the word somatic, because some people like, wait, what's that word? What does that mean? So your definition of what somatic is.
Yeah, so somatic, the word soma at the root, is the Greek word for body. And when I say somatic, we're talking about body-based practices. But when we think about the body generally, right, it's like, oh, I have red curly hair and blue eyes, and I'm this height or this weight. But with somatics, we're really talking about the body from an internal perspective. So how we feel inside. So for example, how does the feeling of anxiety manifest in my body? Is it this tight, sort of pulsating sensation? Where is my anger manifesting in my body, right? Those types of things, which you can actually, once you develop somatic awareness, which is something that I work on with clients, you can start to tap in. And I've actually noticed sometimes I feel the sensation first. I'm like, ooh, I'm feeling some tightness in my neck, and then I pause. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm feeling anxious about this thing. Maybe I should tend to it. And I do feel like somatics is a bit of a buzzword right now. And it does mean body based, but I also feel like there's a lot around nervous system regulation and developing safety. And one of the main tenets of the deeper somatic traditions is that tapping into the body with a sense of safety requires a certain type of pacing. So going slowly and at the pace that your body is ready to go.
I don't really think anybody goes at a slow pace anymore. So I feel like our whole life is super fast paced. And I so relate just even like with the somatics of say you feel anxiety or you're stressed or, whatever happens is getting used to identifying where you feel it in the body and what it feels like, because we all have our, I guess, in quotes, like go to place where we carry certain feelings and emotions. And how you said, oh, my neck or whatever, I'm starting to feel anxious. I instantly could identify with that feeling, the heaviness in my chest, or that I call it like a pit in my stomach, with a lot of different emotions, whether it's anger, anxiety, overwhelm. You feel that a lot. And I do agree, using some different techniques, how cool it is that you can focus on that area and work on reducing the feeling inside or managing it and regulating it, regulating your whole nervous system. And it's like, wow, that just happened. And I did that. However, I will say how many years I spent ignoring all of that living with it, feeling it build. And I mean, I think I've admitted on here probably 1,000 times before, just to the point where I dealt with severe anxiety all day long because just never did anything to really release it. Internally, I was doing everything externally, do more of this, do more of that, or I can relax when this is done, and it just obviously never happens. And I know a big part of your work is, incorporating more play, enjoy into our lives. And I think really slowing down and paying attention to your body, but then allowing that joy and that peace and that calm of your nervous system.
Yeah.
And with that, I would like to ask a little bit about your story because I know that you have a background and you dealt with some severe anxiety and people pleasing and perfectionism and all of that, which so many people identify with. So tell us about your story and how it kind of led you, or maybe it forced you into this work, and how it's helped though too.
Yeah. So my story, I mean, I think all of our stories start with childhood, right? And a lot of things
Right.
can happen in the childhood that manifest into these chronic health things. But around 6 years ago, I had had some really challenging like bosses and workplace situations had moved, and I was starting to get these headaches and like light sensitivity and was starting to not feel great. And then I had a close family friend pass away, and almost overnight, like the next day, my health just like completely nosedived and I bottomed out with now what I would call chronic fatigue syndrome and POTS. Although at the time I was going to all these different doctors and couldn't get like a diagnosis. And I had to quit working. And at like kind of my worst point, I struggled to even like walk up the stairs. So I was really pretty ill and I was age 29 at the time, right? So and I looked healthy, right? So that was an interesting part of like my age and how I looked. But these symptoms, I was like, I do not feel well. And my list of symptoms just kept growing. I felt pretty sick for about like a year and a half. And in that time, I tried a lot of different things around like with functional medicine and with diet and supplements. Although, even before the crash, I had been eating a really clean diet, didn't really drink alcohol and stuff. So that whole piece wasn't exactly what caused it, right? And I didn't necessarily have a doctor. My anxiety was super, super high, and no one really suggested that perhaps all these physical symptoms were emotion based. And I had to kind of figure that out on my own. And at the time, it felt revolutionary when I discovered that that was what was going on for me. But I'm so grateful now that that feels more accepted within the mainstream. But at the time, I felt like, oh, is this like weird? Is this right? But I did end up finding a somatic therapist who taught me about the nervous system, about the different states of the nervous system. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've just been functioning in overdrive. My whole life was like a type A perfectionist, got straight A's in school. And then that's not sustainable if you live your life up here for years and years and pile on other traumas and things like that. And I just completely went the other way and like bottomed out. Um, but it was through that awareness of like, oh, okay, understanding where I was with my nervous system, understanding different emotional triggers, and then understanding certain patterns that were triggering my nervous system. So, for example, when I was getting into like a perfectionist state, how I'd get in this heightened and feel stressed, right? I was in this chronic stress loop. So, it wasn't like an overnight fix once I found somatics. There was some deep inner work that had to happen, and it was layers. It was layers of working with different practitioners. I also found neurofeedback to be helpful. I found some different energy work to be helpful. And then inner child work, parts work to be helpful. And then how play came into the picture for me was once I had done some really deep emotional work, some clearing, some setting boundaries, saying no, leaving environments, right? Really starting to align with my own truth, because I also believe that was part of what was going on. Was I was just like living in a pretty scared, like fawning, people pleasing state, and I needed to come out of that. And that was part of, with Let Your Soma Speak, the name of my business. It's like your soul, your soul's longing speak through your body. What you need is actually being expressed through symptoms. Your symptoms are messengers, and it's not your body betraying you. And so then I started to do a deep dive into, well, who am I? Who am I beyond this anxious, perfectionistic, people pleasing person? Because I didn't always used to be that way. When I was a little kid, I wasn't that way, right? That was what I thought were personality traits, were really coping mechanisms based on what I had experienced in my life. And so I did some true self work. And what I mean by that was just sort of to be like, okay, well, who am I at my core? Who do I believe myself to be beyond all of this? Who do I remember um, that I was like when I was a kid and things like that? And two of the words that came to me were playful and empowered. Although, with different people who do this work, it can be like grounded or radiant or adventurous. Like it can be all sorts of things. But for myself, those were the two words that came through. And so I started to be like, okay, what is it like to be playful? How can I tap into that more? And I met a friend who I felt like really brought that out in me. She hosted these outdoor dance gatherings where we would just sort of like dance in public, and that would boost our confidence too, and we would be playful. And then also at the same time as I was exploring this idea of play, I was certifying as a somatic practitioner. And I think this is important because this explains why I even dove into play even more. But I noticed, because somatics helped me so much, right? That I was like, I got to get trained up in this, and I've got to share this with other people. I got to share the good news, right? But as I started doing work on practice clients, and someone had mentioned, one of my teachers had mentioned that there can be a high level of burnout in this type of work, that he's just known people who do that. And I was like, oh no, because some of my health issues I think had been based on burnout before. And when I started working with clients, I just realized like you are holding space for a lot of people's stress, right? So when I started doing these practice sessions, I was like, oh, I'm really going to need to lean into play. Like this is going to have to become like a huge part of my self-care so that I can show up the best as a practitioner. And then at the same time, as I was working to finish my certification, I actually noticed I was being kind of hard on myself about like needing to finish it on a certain timeline. And I was like, wait, why am I putting pressure on myself? Like I'm trying to help other people, uh, release their stress, and I'm putting some stress on myself. And so then I committed to a week of play. Like that was, I took time off of work, and that was my only goal. I had a to-do list where at the fun, I just put to fun, right? I just said have fun, like, and I put a couple of ideas of things to do, but I said I was open to what flowed my way. It was more spontaneous. But that week just like opened up so much in me. It just shifted something that I didn't even know I needed, because I had been so much in like the learning about trauma and releasing things. And then when I connected to this playful side of me, something really magical happened.
So true. Couple things that you said that stuck out to me so much were that so often we define these like character traits such as perfectionist, people pleaser, type A. We define it as a character trait, and it is more of a protective mechanism. It's a coping mechanism for survival is one, but also we use these things and sometimes we wear them as a badge of honor. And I hate to burst anybody's bubble, and I can say this and it might sound a little harsh, but because I used to wear that badge of honor, like, well, yeah, I'm striving to be the best, of course. It's not a badge of honor at all for a million reasons, because it's coming from not a pure place. It's not driven by, to sum it up, by love. It's driven by fear of earning and proving, and and it's coming from a place of not having a lot of self-love and self-worth. But we're also making that, like, that's how we're identifying. We're identifying who we are as a person as a pleaser, a perfectionist, and that's not who we are at all at our core. And like you said, when you finally step back and, describe yourself, playful comes up, empowering, like what are these? That's your true character. It's those things when you really stop to identify, who am I think that is so imperative. Like a lot of people don't take the time to do that. And they've lost it. They've lost who that person is. And it really is, because you touched on a lot of different things, which I might need to go back. It might be helpful for people because we know these terms of, inner child work, parts work, energy healing. You threw a couple out there. They all play a big part of, yes, healing, but I think that self-awareness and getting back to knowing who you are as a person, because so many of us are not living in line with who we actually are. Like that authentic self is so far gone. We have completely abandoned that person. And I think so much of it is getting back to that. So what were some of the other ones that the different modalities that you used? If you want to just quick touch on them real quick, like what they are, that might be helpful to people, even if they want to explore that on their own.
Yeah, so let's see. So I mentioned first was somatics, and then the parts work, inner child work, which I can definitely explain. And then energy work, I think, is just really supportive with clearing different energies that your body might hold. So it's really like a good combo with somatics, I think, and with helping just get your nervous system to take it down a notch. There's other uses for it, but that's what I used it for. And then parts work and inner child work, they're both similar and different. Inner child work, I think, can pair really well with the play aspect because you can connect with your inner child and remember what they like to do and play together. And then parts work is really about that authentic self piece. So in IFS, internal family systems, there's this idea that there's this core self with these different qualities of like creativity and confidence and courage, but that we've just developed a lot of different parts over our life, like these protective parts. So we would see perfectionism as a part, and people pleasing as a part, and these different things. And instead of exiling them and thinking that they're bad, like befriending them and recognizing what their role is, right? Because even if like, yes, I totally agree that perfectionism has a fear component to it. And that fear is like, I'm trying to keep you safe. Like, I'm trying to help you get like the belonging and the accolades that you're craving, right? And so it's just working with these parts, I think, allows you to have more acceptance for these things that sometimes you're like, oh, why do I have this aspect of myself? And then when you have more self acceptance, you kind of start working together more. You're all kind of more on the same team. So I think that that can be really helpful. And yes, but the true self work, like you said, that was later on in my journey. And I kind of wish that I had done some of that before. But I mean, our journeys are all like how, they're supposed to go. But that was just like, oh yeah, who am I? Who do I want to be? And how do I start embodying that? Which I think is like some of the main foundational pieces for people on their healing journey.
Yeah. And I think all of these different, modalities or different things that we can do to first to identify what you have been identifying as, like, say it's the people pleaser or the perfectionist or whatever it is. And I've actually been doing a lot of research lately on shame. And I was just reading up a lot about how perfectionism is so deeply rooted in shame because we are striving to do everything perfectly to avoid that criticism and the shame and the rejection when really all along we are just shaming ourselves, rejecting ourselves. And we're really avoiding, or we have no internal limits either. And it's about, okay, understanding why I am resorting to, say perfectionism all the time, and understand, okay, so where does this come from and what can I do to start to regulate this nervous system? What's driving it? And it is a process. It takes time. But on the other side of that is so much joy. And it's funny because it did make me think how so much of our unraveling, sort of say, I say unraveling because it's people think of play or, it's like going back. Like I'm just, you said you took a whole week off of work and I'm just going to play. Whereas just speaking that to some type A perfectionist people pleaser, like I got to do it all and I have to do it all right now person, just saying that you need to even take 2 hours and just tell everybody, it's like, I feel like, no, I can't, it can't happen. One thing that I've noticed too is because I'll do that. I don't know if you've caught yourself. It's like you chain yourself in front of the computer or something, or whatever project you're working on. I am not going to leave until I get this done, which is a fantastic habit to have to a point, right? Because if you are constantly doing that and never giving yourself, say, like, let's just say like a play break, you become so non-productive and you end up, I don't know. I mean, I just completely lose it. And it is a waste of time after so long. I mean, we all want to have good habits and be consistent and dedicated to our work and, and get things done. But there is a point where I think we all take it to these extremes and we're not being productive. We're hurting ourselves. We're ignoring our bodies. Like you said, I mean, the anxiety can come up and sometimes it's, even we're just sitting so long, we have these body aches and this and that. Everything just manifests. And with play, there's so many different ways to play. And I think finding your own little niche, I know my couple, and I want to hear what yours are and how we can all go back and really find out what it is, because I think we are so detached from that. We don't even know anymore. I prefer drinking the music and dancing, or I consider play just in the middle of the day if I need it, or whenever, go outside and take a walk around the yard even. That is play to me. Like you said, dancing on the beach, or it can be some people that scares though. I'm going to start dancing in public and people are like, oh no, this play stuff then isn't for me. Well, play can be, maybe you have a stress ball in your desk and you're just whatever. I mean, there's so many different little things. What are some of the tools that you see most effective, or how do you brainstorm for these different play modalities? What works best?
Yeah, definitely. So there is something called play personalities that was introduced by Dr. Stuart Brown, who wrote a book called Play, of these different categories. And yes, mine as well, Jamie, is dancing. But I get that that's not everyone. But like I mean, it just lights me up. Whether it's, I get not everyone wants to do it out in public. I like to go forest dancing by myself. But in terms of, I mean, let's see. There's cooking for some people can be a form of play. I've talked to my dad about that, and that feels very fun for him. For some people, it's like exploring, like going to a downtown area and like looking at window shops, right? And just sort of like that adventurous piece. Nature for sure is a way that a lot of people play. I just want to though make a distinction though. I think there's things that can feel like enjoyable and rewarding that are not necessarily playful. And what I mean by that, when I think about sometimes like people who are really into the outdoors, they might be doing something that's competitive and outcome based. And like that can feel really fulfilling and rewarding if you just like crush it on like a rock climbing thing or something. But I do feel like the power of play, especially as we're talking about for people who have been in perfectionism, is finding things that the outcome doesn't matter. And so that can apply to with like crafting. I've been a part of some like crafting circles where everyone's like, oh, I don't like what I've made. I've got to, like we're being like hard on our hobby time. So I do want to say that's part of how I define play is just like the outcome doesn't matter. And you can definitely have hobbies and things in your life where the outcome matters. Like I think that's totally fine to like want to excel at something, but it's about giving us just one area of our life where we can detach from that. But yeah, in terms of finding out, there's just different categories and playing around with it, right? I realize that improvisation is play for some people. That's a growing edge for me. Doing something that feels more nerve-wracking, but I think that intuitively we have different things we're drawn to.
Yeah. Hey, really, my mind all of a sudden just kind of started firing off all different things. Because especially if I think about different people in my life, like for instance, I think like guys, grown men, it's like, well, I play golf. Well, sure, that could be, like it could be fun, you're outside with people, but I also think that to think outside of the box. It could be something as simple like my husband, for instance. I know half of it is probably de-stressor or whatever at day's end, but he just likes to get in the tractor and clear things out in the backyard. It's a form of play. It's like, think of the little boys when they're little with their tractors and their toys and, anything that has a motor. I mean, think of all the guys that just tinker with motors. They buy old cars and they tinker. I mean, there's so many little things that bring that joy and that inner peace. Maybe it's solitude you're looking for, or maybe it's, a play date, a group. Maybe it is game nights, with people, or, getting back to play, doing things that, for me, I think it has to, where there were joy, because I love that you use joy. It's like, what really sparks joy in you? You said, I think it was on your website, it said something about skipping. And I was laughing because I went through a period of probably 10 years where before I would run, I would skip all the way down our road and back up. And holy cow, is that challenging. But it wasn't really just for, like, oh, I read somewhere or whatever, that this was a great way to warm up your legs before you're running. It just felt good. It felt, it felt fun. But even riding your bike, so many people, oh, a bike ride is specifically for that exercise, that workout, or to get someplace. And I think as a kid, that freedom that I had, that was one of my go-tos, hopping on my bike and just riding around, as fast as I could. And as an adult, how many people just hop on their bike and ride up and down their road, or just for joy. And it helps, I think, to really start to look at other people's lives and what they say tinker with, or what they do in their free time, and identify, I don't know, maybe it helps you identify or brainstorm some things that would help bring out the joy, because that's bottom line, right? Is to incorporate more joy, more ease, and less less anxiety, less overwhelm, less perfecting. And
Yeah, well, to build off of that, I think if folks are still kind of curious about like, okay, well, where do I even start with this? Like maybe I'm interested, but where do I start? Like one would be to actually look back at what you did as a kid, like pretty young, right? Like 4, 5, something like that, and what you were drawn to, because that can be a really interesting place to start. And for example, it might be playing, like maybe you really like to play dress up and now you don't really do that anymore, but maybe it would be fun for you to go to a thrift stop and actually like play around with your style. And I remember for myself with my week of play, something that was really surprising and fun for me. It's also about play can be about spontaneity and curiosity. So I actually went and walked by a flower store where they had a bunch of different single flowers, and I just pulled different flowers and made my own bouquet. And that was just so fun and spontaneous. So I think it's also just sort of being open to the possibilities in everyday life, which um is a mindset shift, definitely.
yeah, definitely. And I think, like you said, it's being curious, I think, and the spontaneity is huge, because it doesn't always necessarily have to be some planned out event. Like you said, you're walking by a flower shop and you just feel that nudge. I think of how many times throughout our days and weeks you feel these nudges to do things and you're pushing it down. I don't have time for that. Oh my gosh, what for? Or why do we talk ourselves out of it? Out of so much joy all of the time. And I think one thing too, um, sometimes I have to reframe and not necessarily use the word play, because I like the word joy so much more. Sometimes because I think play is still in our mind that it has to be something like that we actually did as a kid, that's active, that's crafty, and it's not. And it almost narrows the possibilities down. And I think this is one of those areas that the flowers is a perfect example, because you mentioned that and I thought, oh my gosh, how many children, boy or girl, would be outside and gather a bouquet of, say, dandelions to bring in to mom, right? And it's the grown-up version is walking by a flower shop or pulling your car over on the side of the road where there's wildflowers and collecting some. It's those tiny little things that we have to stop and incorporate more of that into our life. I mean, that it's those moments that we give ourselves truly that are so important for the bigger picture of our health. Truly.
Definitely. Yeah, I hear what you're saying about play, maybe feeling like this activity that you need to like
Yeah.
figure out and access versus like orienting towards joy or awe or
Aw.
wonder. Yeah, which nature is really great for that, right? You can just get yourself outside and start to notice like the moss on the trees or the way the light is coming in. And with that too, I would say that when you orient towards the fun and the joy, that actually helps with that nervous system piece. It's bringing in things that help just bring you back to a baseline of calm or feeling safe, because generally it's hard to notice those things if you're feeling pretty dysregulated. But bringing more of that in can be, like you said, really helpful for your health.
Right. And I agree, they can be hard to notice when you're in that state of, I don't know, I always just, the fight, flight, freeze, living in survival mode and all of that,
Mhm.
because I do take the time now and walk outside and look at the stars. In fact, I'm obsessed with finding the Big Dipper every single night. And especially when I travel, it's the first thing I look for. Where is it? Where is it here? So I can look for it every night. And one thing about that is it's something like that that grounds you. It grounds me to know that even when I'm away from home, there's the Big Dipper. and my family or whoever is back at home, they can look up and see that same Big Dipper. There's things like that awe of when you're standing on top of a mountain, like, wow, or, in front of the ocean, or just wherever you are, whatever you're doing, to stop and really look at something. Yeah, whether it's the moss on the tree, the colors of the leaves, the smell of the air, the birds chirping, and we are always going 100 miles an hour, that with AirPods in, right? And texting at the same time and doing all of these things, that all of these simple things that you did notice. And I mean, think of kids, really truly think of yourself as a kid or other kids. I have this picture right now of, I can remember it myself, but even with all of my kids playing sports, for the very first time as youngsters and like toddlers, elementary school, they're out on the field and an airplane goes by and the balls are soaring all over the place because they're all looking up, wow. Or, it's like, why did we lose that though? To get a little bit of that wonder and that awe back of just what's going on around us is a huge source of play, but calm and joy and peace. And to know that, I think that there's something so much bigger out there is, I think it's grounding.
A wonderful grounding resource.
So tell me a little bit about what you do with clients one-on-one and what you do, because I know you go out and, obviously as a somatic practitioner, what do you do and how do you do that?
Yeah. So I do one-on-one sessions. I've also had a focus on workshops. So in my workshops, I've done some around self-compassion and around play and lightheartedness. One of my interests, actually, in terms of people that I like to help, is other helpers. And why that is because I think that those of us in the helping professions a lot of times can really over-identify with the role of helper, or we're in a helping role in so many areas of our life. And so again, with that embodying joy piece, rediscovering play and creativity, reminding yourself that you are not just a helper. It's like one aspect of you, but you're a multi-dimensional person. But what it looks like, so I kind of do two different things. I do like more somatic body awareness, stress release part work sessions. And then I do offer play sessions that are related to how to prioritize play. So things that we talked about, the playful personality. Also, what are your barriers? Because I think a lot of us have resistance to adding in more play, and then coming up with ideas to play, right? How to add it into your schedule. But what it might look like for like the one-on-one somatic piece is helping people first develop that somatic awareness, the language, being able to tune into their body. But then beyond that, starting to then recognize what your body is asking for, right? So we're tapping into like the body, what it's speaking, right? Let your soma speak. Um, and a lot of times that will kind of happen in two ways. So your body might be asking for more like witnessing and validation and like comforting around something. Or it might really want to express something through a movement. We might also be able to tap into what's a true yes or no for you with an external situation by tuning into your body, or notice what type of boundaries you need by feeling into your body. So that's some of the things that we cover in a session. And one thing I just wanted to tie back into, which we talked about at the very beginning, but one reason why I think somatics is really important is because anything that we experience in life, like we experience as a whole person, which includes our body. And so I do think there can be a bias sometimes towards thinking that it only affects us here, that we need to just talk about it and like think about it and figure out how to view it, and then we'll have it covered. But as you mentioned before, too, like with anxiety isn't just something we experience here, it's a physiological phenomenon that's including our whole body. And so, my belief is that to really work with things holistically is to also include modalities that incorporate the body.
Definitely. And I think one thing too is this really opens our eyes to not take life so serious. Like we can be more lighthearted and it has health benefits. There's a really because people often we live so rigid sometimes and we just take everything so serious and I think the we don't understand how detrimental it truly is to our overall health and the correlation between our aches and our pains and our diseases and our sickness because that's the body does store everything. It really is all connected and it's fascinating. I won't go into this, but I do every time I have an ache or pain or an illness, that's the first thing I do is Google like, okay, what does this mean in your body? For we want to think our way out of everything and sometimes we have to feel our way through it or feel and heal our way through it, right? And I think the somatics is, I mean, it's definitely a way to improve not just your physical health, but your emotional health, your mental health, and it's often overlooked. Definitely. Yes. One more thing I have to say on that is we did a session a few months ago. I remember because it was right after Christmas. Well, it was in January, middle of January. So coming off of Christmas. And then we had been on a vacation. And I can remember right when my youngest kids were going back to school, we had several snow days. So it had been almost like a month with very little work, very little, schedule. I mean, the holidays were great and everything, but when you're ready to get back in and you're starting to feel this build of like, okay, I've got stuff I got to do. I was so like overwhelmed and just, when we did our session. And I can remember in the beginning, it took it took quite a bit for me to really relax. My head is going, I don't have time for this. I have to do this. I have to do that. I have to do this. And forcing myself though, just stick with this. And knowing though ahead of time that this was going to come up, because I think when anybody does this work that is so driven and used to certain coping mechanism or a lifestyle, when you stop and try to do this stuff, that you're going to have resistance. And I was resisting it a lot. And then all of a sudden it was just like this switch about 10 minutes or so into it. And I think I finally was able to be in my body and I started to just feel that wash of calm, like, okay, I've got this, I am enough, and you start to just, or you try not to think about it so much and you feel more of it and how easy it is. And you're like, wow, I'm doing this and I'm doing it all by myself and I'm doing it by being, not doing. And it is highly effective, highly effective. Definitely. Yeah. And I'm sure you have, I mean, obviously you witness it when you work with people, you see those switches and how important it is to stick with it.
Yes, I think that having resistance or starting a session just being really up here is very common. It's something that can still happen to me, right? So I just want to normalize that for sure.
Kelly, this was a fantastic conversation, so full of information. And honestly, I feel lighter after that. Like, let's just do something for ourselves. If we could pick one thing every day, some days we might have more time. Some days it might just be a few minutes. And it is taking 2 seconds maybe to go look at the stars or watch the sunrise. It makes such a big difference. So yes. And where can people find you if they would like to find out some more?
Yes, so I am active on Instagram. My handle is at Let Your Soma Speak, and I also have my website, which is www.letyoursomaspeak.com.
Awesome. And so you do one-on-one, obviously in person, but you do virtual sessions too?
Yes,
Yeah.
virtual through Zoom. Yep.
And then group, you also do corporate stuff, right?
I do corporate trainings, yes. So I have a
Mhm.
page like that on my website, and then workshops, which I advertise on Instagram. I'll post it on my website. I also actually want to plug my newsletter because I have a background in writing and I put a lot of heart and soul into each newsletter. So if you want to stay in touch with me, I'd recommend, and there's a form on my website for that.
Definitely. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time and all of your information. This was amazing.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, thanks for listening to Authentically Raw. I'm excited to announce that my book, Results Daily Planning and Self Development, is for sale on Amazon and on my website at jamiebarris.com. It's the perfect blend of a daily planner with hourly schedule. It has wellness journal prompts to help you develop yourself personally, professionally, and relationally while strengthening your physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health and well being. It's the ultimate life planner. It guides you along your journey to design and manifest the life you desire with clarity and confidence, one day at a time. Also, on my website, jamiebarris.com, you can click on the freebie tab and download a free ebook. It is the best of the best of the planner and wellness prompts. It has goal setting, habit formation, vision boards, you name it, it's in there. About 50 or so pages. Download it for free and it is yours. If you leave a review of this podcast or the book, snap a screenshot, email it to me, jamie@jamiebarris.com, and you will receive a free coaching session. As always, I'm rooting for you. Be real, be raw, be authentic.